Please note that this podcast does not substitute for medical advice. This episode is sponsored by Biome Renew.
Hello and welcome to Microbiome Revolution. It's an exciting podcast to begin with. Really happy to have Dr. Shashi Naidoo, orthopedic surgeon, with us, and Shashi Naidoo, owner of Alucia Skin Aesthetics. Thank you for joining us on this podcast. We're really excited to talk around the microbiome. What is the microbiome? Why is it important? And what does it mean for us in our lives? And we know just from the conversations happening around the medical industry that this is a hot topic. So Ashley, we're very excited to have you on the podcast. I want to start just with a few questions before going into the microbiome, which is going to be a bit fun and lighthearted. So I'm going to go with this or that, and you're going to tell me which one. Okay, so Ash, Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Whiskey or wine?
Always whiskey.
Always whiskey, not both.
I don't think they taste very good together.
Sashi, pizza, burger?
Ooh, both.
McDonald's or Burger King?
Burger King.
Both.
Both.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Guys, listen, microbiome is such a big topic at the moment. And I'm so glad to have an expert on the panel with us to discuss this. I'm going to start with a few did you knows because I've been educating myself on the microbiome and it is fascinating. Mm-hmm. So, did you know, Ash, you probably knew this.
Ash knows everything.
He knows everything, doesn't he?
He knows everything.
He knows everything.
I'm sure our listeners are about to find that out as well. But did you know your body is home to trillions of microbes? And if you were to weigh them all, they would collectively outweigh your brain. Fascinating. I thought that was fascinating. Yeah. Another one is your gut microbiome is like a bustling city. It's estimated that there are more than 100 trillion microorganisms in your gut alone, which is more than the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy.
Wow.
And that in one person gut, that is absolutely fascinating. But Ash, from an expert side, can you please just give us more insight into what the microbiome is? Why does it exist? And maybe some medical facts around the microbiome.
Sure. So I'd like to start by saying that we need to define what the microbiome is, and it's a collection of organisms that live on topical surfaces in our body. Our gut, although within us, is still a topical surface because of the communication from mouth to anus. And we have a collection of bacteria, fungi, viruses, protozoa, and archaea, and each one of these organisms are there for a specific purpose. They help us to digest certain substances, they help us to absorb certain substances, they influence our immune system to be able to react to different diseases in different ways. It helps us to also absorb certain medications and drugs and respond to certain medications and drugs in different formats. We may actually find a lot more about the microbiome as we go down this road in the future. So we can't say that we know everything at the outset.
Sure, that's interesting. And really thinking about that, learning more about the microbiome as we, I suppose, delve deeper into it. One of the questions I had was, how does the microbiome develop in early life? And what are some of the factors that can influence its composition?
So that's an important topic. The first 1,000 days is something that most pediatricians and pediatric allergologists talk about. It starts well before the first 1,000 days of the child's life. It starts in pregnancy. The microbiome composition on the skin, the gut, and so forth of the mom, it's known now to influence the microbiome of the baby while in utero via the placenta.
That's incredible.
So it's not exactly a sterile environment. Secondly, the mode of delivery. If somebody has a cesarean section versus vaginal delivery, children are colonized by bacteria of the mom's skin during a cesarean section versus
So you are saying the way you enter the world.
You are programming your life for the future. Wow,
that's interesting. Wow.
And it goes beyond that. Even our choices in terms of feeding, breastfeeding versus formula feeding. If we go the breastfeeding route, a different subset of microbes colonize that child versus those that are formula fed. And this leads down the road of intolerances and sensitivities in your gut in the future to certain foods. It also influences things like obesity in future life, right from that moment. And that first 1,000 days, we need to also consider things like antibiotic use. If we just flagrantly use antibiotics in that first 1,000 days, we may annihilate some portions of the microbiome
Yeah.
that are meant to be there.
Yeah.
Dietary influences with weaning, the choice of diets we choose to follow in the future. All of these things are going to program which microbes will survive in that gut or on that skin and so forth.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So what we are saying is essentially the first 1,000 days can define a lot of the makeup of your body and how you respond to certain things as well. But also, I suppose what we will get to through this conversation is that there's hope. So if the first 1,000 days wasn't particularly what it should have been or could have been, there is ways to rebalance that, right?
Exactly.
I think just before bringing Shashi into this, I just wanted to ask you to give us a bit more definition on a term or terms that we have heard quite regularly in the not too distant history. So pre, pro, and postbiotics. Could you please tell us what those actually mean?
So it's a good question. So we all know that probiotics, and they exist quite largely in all parts of the world, and these are meant to be live microorganisms, mostly bacteria, that we are trying to ingest, or in some cases apply to certain areas of the body for that bacteria to take.
Sure.
Prebiotics are more either digestible or undigestible fibers that feed certain bacteria. So you must.
What are
think
some
of it
examples
more.
of that, Ash?
So on that side of things, you may look at substances like inulin. It's a pretty popular prebiotic in a lot of skin preparations, in some foods as well.
Okay.
And these substances get broken down by specific microbes inside you or on you to create small molecules that help with certain parts of your homeostasis of that organ.
Sure.
Postbiotics is actually the new kid on the block, and it's something that's gathering a lot of traction, largely because it's basically the effect that these good bacteria have on us. It's these small molecules that are produced by those bacteria acting on the prebiotics. To give you a rough example of such a thing, hyaluronic acid is an example of a postbiotic, and it's quite widely used for many things. I mean, as an orthopedic surgeon, we use it in joints.
Interesting.
But what it does is it pulls a lot of moisture or fluid with it to help with hydration, and that's more or less its action.
What are some of the common everyday foods or substances or anything that our listeners might be familiar with that contain some of these pro, and postbiotics?
So that's a good question as well. Look, I mean, our diet itself. I mean, a banana is a very good example of a good prebiotic.
Yeah.
Certain leafy vegetables that we eat cannot be digested in our cecum and require certain bacteria to act on them. And if you're looking at everyday postbiotics that we're ingesting, there isn't many. But our food is not exactly sterile. There are large amounts of microbes that live on our foods in different areas of the world. We eat different microbes on a daily basis as well. So to answer your question, it's something that we are exposed to regularly.
Yeah.
But it's about how to tailor exactly what exposure we need for us to maintain health.
Sure. Amazing. Thanks, Ash. Sasha, just bringing you into the conversation as well. And, with your experience around the usage of postbiotics, of course, owning an aesthetics brand as well. And so I'd love to know, what has been your experience with postbiotics?
So let me start by saying, I think the microbiome has become like a really trending topic.
Yeah.
But my first experience with understanding this was about the gut microbiome. Everyone thinks gut health, and that was how my first experience with taking pre and probiotics. And I noticed such a significant change in energy levels, sleeping, bloating, just a multitude of things that changed. And then, because I had no idea, I think as 99.9% of people, that you could actually affect the microbiome of your skin.
Yes.
That was completely new. So when I discovered this, I was like, okay, let's give this a go.
It's like a secret sauce, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, if you have an imbalance in your microbiome, it's going to lead to a lot of problems with your skin. So you're looking at things like acne, rosacea, inflammation, premature aging. So something I experienced personally myself was eczema, which is why I personally sought out the brand. And what I noticed when I am having a flare-up, because mine is stress-related.
Sure.
And something I didn't realize before is that there's actually a brain-gut, a brain-skin link, which is mind-blowing, that, you know, stress can actually cause this eczema breakout, but then you can actually use something that's going to assist you in shortening the periods of inflammation, assisting it heal, or actually even preventing it from come on to an extent. So I then had such a good experience myself utilizing the product that I then decided I needed to stock it in store in my clinic, and I'm now the biggest fan.
That's amazing, because I think everything starts with a story, and there's nothing more impactful than your personal journey. And so with actually stocking a product or products that have postbiotics in them, what are some of the stories that have come out of that you might have heard from your clientele?
So we use a number and recommend it for a number of different things. One of the great things that we've seen when we do treatments that actually cause irritation to the skin, so if we're doing peels, if we're doing microneedling or dermapen, you're actually causing injury to the skin. So we use, I was calling it emollient, what is it again?
Ointment.
The ointment. We use the ointment on the skin after that and recommend the clients to buy that. And the healing time is just so much quicker. There's more radiance to the skin. Clients are just loving it.
So you're saying directly after having treatment, applying some of these treatments and ointments that have postbiotics.
Can you explain why the ointment would speed up that recovery time?
It's a preparation, the ointment. It's more the postbiotic in the mix that's acting well. There is a very high oil content to these ointments, and it works as an occlusive dressing or a barrier to try and keep in some of the good stuff that's coming out when you do these micro needlings and so forth. You know, when you do invasive things to the skin, you get products that are released, and some of those things are like your PRPs and so forth that help you to have a nice resurfacing of that area, and this is where the vampire facials and all those things came from. So much in the same way, using the ointment as an occlusive dressing tries to keep in the good things, but the postbiotics actually do help with healing and recovery of the inflammatory component that's happening there.
So what have you noticed in terms of, because the time element's a massive thing, and I'm sure anyone that could speed up recovery in some way, shape or form would be super interested in that.
Absolutely.
What have you noticed in terms of how quickly the recovery
So downtime, and we were actually speaking with someone, a girl called Chanel, and she was saying previously she would have 3 days where she would be red and very inflamed, and now it's down to 24 hours.
Wow.
So that is a big
That's
difference
huge.
where you're actually able to go out in public and look good again. But also in general, people with acne breakouts are noticing. And again, I'm just telling you the results I've had. Ashley will go into the why of
the
it
medical.
all. The why people are having just phenomenal results, especially with acne as well. And seeing those results. Aging is something that you will get afterwards. You'll notice, okay, the aging is there, but it prevents the premature aging. So obviously we're not getting feedback on that yet, but as you know,
But time will...
Yes, with the microbiome, if it's disturbed, it definitely causes the premature aging.
That's amazing. So, of course, one of the sponsor for this episode is Biome Renew, and we know that postbiotics is a key ingredient within that the range. Is this a range you've been using?
Yes, it is.
And any particular cream or ointment that you...
So if I've done a treatment, I will always use the ointment. And we were actually chatting about this. There's a difference between the enriched cream and the moisturizer. So the moisturizer is far lighter. I generally enjoy that because I've got quite an oily skin already. So if you're someone who lives in Joburg and suffers with a dry skin or likes just a richer composition of cream, the enriched cream is good for you. And we were chatting about this. People have a misconception that if they use something that's rich, that it will cause an acne breakout. That is not true at all. It's a myth.
That's good. I mean, one of the things we want to talk about is actually debunking some of the myths. This is a great intro into that, actually, Ash. So what are some of the misconceptions or myths about the microbiome that we could debunk?
Look, I think the one straight off the bat is to think that all probiotics are equal. To start in that point, there's large amounts of product with probiotics in topical preparations as well as ingested, and we may not necessarily need those specific bacteria for the action we're trying to convey. And another one that comes up quite often is can you influence the microbiome permanently? The answer is no. it's an ever-changing thing. Every time we move to a new area, every time we change things like our exercise habits, our diet, the source of our foods, the people we live with,
Yes.
we share microbiomes with
So it's
our
person to
environment
person
in
and
us,
environment.
and that's exactly it. And to make a change on a fruitful basis to be able to affect health by using the microbiome, it has to be a household change. It has to be an environment change. It has to be a bigger picture change.
So you're looking at essentially holistic change.
Yes.
It's not just one thing.
Yes.
You've got to
so
look at a multitude.
you can't just eat a capsule or apply a lotion and expect it to change you
Yes.
forever. It's not
What
that.
if you take a capsule and use it?
Touche.
This is interesting because just from conversation, you are now based in Dubai.
Yes.
And so what have you noticed in regards to the way your skin has been in transition to a new place?
And this is an interesting story. So my microbiome will be completely different here in South Africa because I've had a complete shift of location, so it would be completely different. And those kind of things are triggering, especially for someone like me who suffers from eczema. You're likely to get, when that process is happening, you get a flare-up of eczema. So it's almost like a stress or a trigger. And I had that, and noticing using the cream, so I got the flare-up, but then within a few days it was resolved. So yes, you could still get the flare-up, but then utilizing the product and the postbiotic cream,
incredible.
you notice a much shorter period and a reduced flare-up, if that makes sense.
So that rebalancing was accelerated, if we
Yes,
could say that. That's
exactly.
fantastic. Ash, I suppose this is also a really good time to then bring in the conversation around unbalanced microbiome. And so what happens when the microbiome is unbalanced?
Yeah, so that's actually a key thing. So the term that you'll see bouncing around quite often in medical paraphernalia, I guess, is the word dysbiosis, right? So it's a state whereby either the composition or the function of the microbiome is altered. And it can happen due to a disease state in that person, or it could be the first step towards a disease state.
Okay.
So just by defining a dysbiosis or finding a dysbiosis doesn't mean you've found something that diagnoses something, or you found something that you're going to treat. This is why we say it's a moving target, right?
Right.
But understanding which microorganisms are missing from the mix, or what functions are missing, or what products that we need are missing, that's where we hope to effect change in this market. Getting back to that, to lead on to that question, the diseases that come with dysbiosis, I mean, Shashi's mentioned some of it. A large component of dysbiosis is tailoring towards inflammation.
Wow.
And we all drive cars with early warning systems these days, right? So it's one thing to look at medicine the way you met a crash and you have a great person that can go and look at the crash scene. But if you had something that could alert you to something going off much earlier, it could save a life. It's the same thing here. So this microbiome itself senses changes in the environment, senses changes in our diet, senses changes when we take on certain medications, when we're ill, etc. And it relays this information to your immune system. And that's where the inflammation comes from. There's certain pathways that sit in there that's central to cancer, central to infection, central to inflammatory disorders, central to atopic disorders. If you're looking at things like eczema, food allergies, insensitivities, if you're looking at psoriasis, if you're looking at some forms of arthritis, it can all link back in some way to this.
Wow.
And there's even links now to the brain. You were bringing that up as well. The microbiome is being looked at in many ways now to link to diseases like Parkinson's and autism. And again, now these are things that may affect you much later in the future or early in life, but if we are able to start effecting change globally on the microbiome in the body for health, then you can mitigate some of these diseases in the long term.
Incredible. So I'm going to try and summarize that in terms of an understanding. What we are essentially saying is an unbalanced microbiome, there will be warning signs that the body is indicating to you that it's not balanced, and there's things that we need to look at, and there could be other illnesses that form out of that, I suppose is the best way to put it in a non-medical way. But that's phenomenal. I came into this conversation trying to learn as much as I could, and even in this short space of time, I feel like my mind's blown with the microbiome. And so I suppose leading on to another conversation around this is, once we understand a little bit more about the microbiome, what could we do to care for the microbiome?
That's a good thing. I like to, I heard this, let me put it this way. I heard this in a way from somebody else's talk on microbiomes, and it was, what do you do in the morning? You get up in the morning, you wash your face, you have a shower, you brush your teeth, you do all of these things, you put on certain things, and then you go out into the day. But have you ever once decided to flip over your toothpaste, to flip around your lotions, your shower gel? Look at the amount of chemicals that you've just put onto yourself. Each one of these chemicals have a role to play in terms of what's happening on that microbiome. You might actually be influencing it in a bad way. And part of the thought change that we're trying to drive is we have to become more cognizant of what we are doing, what we are eating, what we are applying, what we are using. Not everything has been approved towards sustainability of this microbiome.
Sure.
And the more we understand that we're influencing something that may influence a bigger picture, it's not just a toothpaste, it's not just a soap anymore. It's a chemical that is changing your ability to show a disease or to get a disease. And I think that's an important thing for us. In South Africa, we don't have a regulatory body looking at the microbiome in terms of regulating our products. And this is exactly why this road was started.
That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. Shashi, just thinking around some of the topics that you mentioned in terms of how it's influenced your life and even those around clientele, it sounds like you've become a huge advocate for the microbiome, conversations around it. What are some of the things you might have mentioned to friends in conversation around the microbiome and what you've experienced besides some of the stuff you mentioned already? But are there any interesting conversations that have happened with friends where they've just gone, wow?
The fact that all of my friends are currently using Biomoney, because it is actually the only product available on the market with postbiotics in it and postbiotic enriched. I think my experience and just generally, like, my skin health has never been, I'm 42 and my skin has never looked so great. So I think that in itself,
it's a story.
It's a testament. And I have friends suffering with different things, and it's the same. I would recommend the same thing, whether it be acne, whether it be premature aging, whether it be psoriasis, eczema. It's a kind of a one-stop shop because microbiome is affected by so many things. And I feel like people try and treat it very aggressively, but that can actually affect your microbiome if you're too aggressive with cleaning. Like, they're having acne breakouts, so they'll strip the skin, wash, and use these crazy toners, but you're actually causing more harm than you are doing good. So you need to bring it back to the basics and start with this.
That's amazing to think in order just to think about the damage we're actually doing in trying to repair something. So we have the mindset, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But if we're not aware of what exactly we are putting onto our skin, you mentioned the amount of chemicals that are in many products. And it's one thing to do that, but it's another thing to counteract that by rebalancing. And I suppose making sure that we are healing correctly and treating the skin correctly as well as one element of looking at the microbiome. Andile, it's great to have you on this conversation as well. We're talking all things microbiome. I'm particularly interested in finding out your personal experience with using products that have postbiotics in them. What has it been like for you? As well as maybe your extended family?
My experience personally is usually when I go to Sashi's clinic for my peels or my Dermapen, I usually get flare-ups. Like my skin would be dry and reddish and quite irritated. But I started using the ointment. And in about a day or two, then those flare-ups will be gone.
Wow. That is incredible. So actually this brings into what we talked about a bit earlier with the recovery time actually being sped up by using the ointment.
The ointment, it works for me quite a lot. And I use the ointment on my daughter as well. She struggles with very dry skin.
It's trustworthy when a mum is bringing it to the child.
Absolutely. She really struggles with super dry skin and it's worked beautifully on her.
How old is your daughter?
She's 8.
Wow. Okay, so what have you noticed in your daughter in terms of using the product and a shift or change?
Definitely shift. Less dry, less flaky. Her skin looks more healthier, and it's not longer as ashy as it used to look.
Wow.
And even when, sometimes my daughter would just take a bath and instantly she's dry. But now it doesn't occur as much and as often as before.
That's incredible.
So there's some stability there.
And it's amazing how quickly you've noticed a shift and a change. And I'm assuming, that's after a period of time of using other products and different products.
Absolutely, yes.
And then in a very short space of time, noticing a significant difference.
A major change.
And also just the way the look and feel of the skin itself. looking at that. That's incredible. So actually, we were also just talking around some of our diet and how that can influence our microbiome, and just taking us through once again your understanding of pre, pro, and postbiotics. What can you tell us that you've picked up with food as well?
So in general, when we discuss microbiome, it's not just skin microbiome,
Yes.
there's gut microbiome, there's oral microbiome, vaginal microbiome. So we have these, things at play all the time, and you want the good to be better than the
Yes,
bad.
yeah.
And the one thing that the bad bacteria thrive on, if I can phrase it in a way that everyone can understand, is sugar.
Okay,
It is one
wow.
of the absolute worst things that you can do. So an excess of sugar will make the bad guys go, woohoo,
So
it's a
bad
party
microbiome
in
loves
Yeah.
sugar.
so that
they're
can
after
really
sugar.
throw off your microbiome. So it's one of the things I would avoid. So you can't just use and as great as this product is, it really, really is good, but you
Yeah.
want to look at other things in which,
Yes.
so what you eat, the way you take care of yourself, these are all factor.
Like
It's
a
a re-
lifestyle thing.
It
Yes,
is a
yeah,
lifestyle thing
and we hear this word used quite regularly with holistic treatment, holistic well-being, but essentially that's what it is. It's
Yes.
like, I'm not just going to find a product solution. I need to look at the balance of my life.
Absolutely.
What am I
What
taking in?
what you're actually eating, because when
Yeah.
you're looking at pre and postbiotics, so your probiotics is actually the bacteria that live in your system.
Yes.
The prebiotics is what they're going to feed on, how will they actually survive, and then the postbiotics are what the actual byproducts are of those good bacteria that you want in your system. So now we're basically adding that to the skin already there.
That's
if that makes
amazing.
sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Andila, I suppose even just thinking about yourself as a mum and using up, some of the products and so on your children. Children?
Child.
On your child.
For now.
What would you say to other parents, other mums, other dads, that might be considering changes or products for their kids?
One, I'm just going to take from what Dr. Ashley touched on. I wasn't aware that from birth, your skin is already influenced by what your parents have and so forth, while the parent is pregnant before birth,
Wow, yeah.
So your daughter or your son or your kids are born with a certain microbiome.
Yeah.
So the sooner parents start treating their kids, the better.
Wow. So change is possible.
Absolutely.
If we haven't done certain things correctly with our diet, maybe other ointments, creams, products that we're using on our skin, there is change possible. And it's how quickly we do that and what we do
I feel
about
like the
that.
sooner we introduce that lifestyle to our children, the better, and we can prevent all sorts of diseases.
That's phenomenal. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Is there anything else either of you would want to add to people listening out there that you might become aware of, or something that's really struck you around the use of postbiotics?
I had no idea before entering this conversation the link between microbiome health as a precursor, if you have bad microbiome health, for example, to other diseases. It really, really does affect your immunity. So if we think of your skin being a barrier, it really almost is with the microbiome, like this constant battle going on. So if you
Yes.
think about having this good microbiome health in order to have an immune system to be able to fight off potential diseases, but even things linked to Parkinson's. So it really is a topic that's kind of super extensive, and I don't understand it fully yet.
Yes.
But what we're finding out, and the more I'm finding out the link between microbiome health and immunity and preventing diseases,
Yes.
it's
I
you
must
really
say, I'm
still-
also quite blown away.
Yes,
Yeah, and
it's something you should be paying attention
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's such a great place to land this conversation. Is that there's so much we could go into. It's such a wide conversation, and that we are hoping to bring in different topics, different findings, both scientific and through experience as well, so that we can learn more about the microbiome,
Absolutely.
how it influences our lives, and what we can do to change it in a positive way, and have a balanced, holistic approach to how we live our lives.
Yeah.
Ash, I suppose, just as we are looking to kind of wrap up this conversation, one of the things I'm quite interested about is the emerging research around microbiome. So what do you know of, or what are you aware of in terms of exciting advancements in microbiome science?
So the first thing I'm going to tell you is you're quite right about the increasing interest. Just a little stat to give you there.
Yes.
If you go back 10 years on PubMed, quite a popular medical searching tool, 844% year-on-year increase in people trying to publish something in microbiome science.
Wow.
So that just tells you how much of interest there is. Now, the thing that is emerging is the want to define the microbiome, to test the microbiome, to look at it in terms of its richness, its diversity, and its quality, right? The more diverse your microbiome is, the healthier you're going to be, proven. What's emerging is different formats of testing and how to test, and I think that's quite an important topic all on its own. There is a lot of things to debunk there, which we would in future podcasts, but to bring it back to this point, like the idea of knowing what the landscape is like, to define what the African microbiome is,
Sure.
and how it's going to affect us in terms of the diseases specific to our population. This is where the greatest amount of work is going to be.
Wow.
Because if we define what is a correct or healthy microbiome, we then define how far out our dysbiotic states are, and then we can start to address things like the products that we are using.
That's incredible.
And improve all the products that we are using based around that.
So are you saying that it would be possible in the not too distant future to have maybe a personalized skin treatment or skincare range for yourself?
It's highly possible. It's highly possible. With the skin as a touch point, there's much fewer microorganisms that live on the skin versus the gut. So it is, for lack of a better word, the lower hanging fruit there,
Yes.
versus trying to define the gut. With a lower bacterial biomass, you'll be able to subcategorize into specific disease types and specific skin types and marry the both together. So it's not that far off. There's a lot of work being done in lot of parts of the world that actually led us down this road to start to shape our brand.
That's fantastic. So as the podcast is called The Microbiome Revolution, this really is a revolution in regards to the way we are considering the effects on our body from our environment, from what we are actually exposing ourselves to, putting onto our skin, for example, using the skin as an example, but all these different things ingesting as well, that is actually affecting and having a ripple effect in multiple areas of our life. So I'm excited to go into more conversations around this as we have plenty more discussions around this table and talk more things around the microbiome. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Shashi. It was fantastic to have a chat with you guys and to listen to your experiences as well. Hope you guys enjoyed getting more information on the microbiome and, like me, had your minds blown as well. Thank you very much.
Please note that this podcast does not substitute for medical advice.